Are we ready, Artie? Artie?
This is now the joint.
Yeah, are we ready?
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the April 23rd, 2013 meeting of the Glendale City Council and the Glendale Successor Agency at 3:05 p.m. We have a roll call for the council.
Council members: Friedman,
Here.
Najarian,
Here.
Sinanian,
Here.
Mayor Weaver.
Here, and for the Successor Agency.
Board members: Friedman,
Here.
Najarian,
Here.
Sinanian,
Here.
Chair Weaver.
Here. Read the report, please.
The agenda for the April 23rd, 2013 joint public meeting of the City Council and Successor Agency was posted on Thursday, April 18th, 2013 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. Next.
First item is Successor Agency approval for a special Successor Agency meeting minutes of April 16th, 2013.
I'll move the minutes.
Second.
There's no objection. They'll stand approved as submitted. Next.
Next item is Director of Community Development regarding refunding of Glendale Redevelopment Agency bond issues from 2002, 2003, and 2010. 2A is an agency resolution requesting Glendale Oversight Board to direct Successor Agency to undertake proceeding for the refunding of 2002, 2003, and 2010 bond issues.
Yes, Mr. Ochoa.
Yes, sir. We have for you this afternoon good news and a tremendous opportunity that will allow us to refund 02 and 03 tabs that could save us in excess of several $100,000 a year. So with that, we'll have our Economic Development Director, Mr. Lanzafame, provide the details.
Mr. Lesser.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Successor Agency, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. The former redevelopment agency issued bonds in 2002 and 2003 for various projects in the downtown area, and then to refund some prior bonds. We also issued some tax-exempt bonds in 2010. Those bonds are proceeds have been frozen with the Dissolution Act. But AB 1484 did provide, that is the follow-up on the Dissolution Act, did provide that successor agencies could refund their existing debt if it did not increase the cost and you didn't take out additional equity, so to speak. So subject to an oversight board approval, you could do that. Working with our financial advisor, Harrell and Associates, that had been on all of those bond issues with us, we looked at the current market and what our existing interest rates were, and we believe by refunding this year, we could save approximately $875,000 per year in debt service. The effect that has through the dissolution process is about half of that amount can be used to repay the city loan once we get our finding of completion, which we believe will be in the next 2 weeks or so. And then an additional amount, the other half, would be distributed to the other taxing entities, including the city. We think there's another $50,000 or $60,000 there. So we could see about $500,000 additional revenue come back to the city of Glendale as a result of this refunding. There may be additional savings with the 2010 bond issue. It has a different call date, and really that's what's driving this today. The 2002 and 2003 bonds, the next time that we could refund them is December of 2013. So we're on a bit of a fast track to get all of our approvals with the state, get out to market, and get these sold to meet that December deadline. We're not sure if the 2010 bonds will help us in this issue. If they do, we're asking you to include them. If they don't, we'll merely drop them from the issue. As I said, it's about a 6-month process after we get our approvals from the state, and we're thinking that will take some time. We would anticipate being back here in front of you in July, a sale in September, a close in October, and then we'll be in a position to refund the bonds. Staff will ultimately be recommending a negotiated transaction. The redevelopment agency has done both competitive and negotiated transactions. There are benefits to both in certain circumstances. When we issued the 2002 and 2003 bonds, bond insurance was available, the market was very stable, things were on the rise. Everybody knew what the instrument was, and they could really sharpen their pencil and give us a good bid. When 2010 rolled around, we had seen an implosion of the insurance, bond insurance market. The market was very volatile. There was the threat of redevelopment being dissolved on the horizon. It was more appropriate to use negotiated, where you've got a story that you need to have somebody go and research and put in the time knowing that they'll get the sale of bonds. We have that today. We have a very difficult market. There's only been a few of issues that have come to market in this refunding. We still have our same old issues of concentration. That is, we have a lot of property tax being paid by just a few property owners. However, so looking at that, you go, that's a bit of a problem. But when you look at the history of payment, you look at the history of appeals, it's very favorable for Glendale. That's why we want somebody that we can negotiate with that will take the time to look into this story. We don't need to decide that for some time, but I wanted to let you know at least what our thinking was. At this point, we're asking that the successor agency direct staff to have the oversight board direct the successor agency to refund these. It's a little bit of a nuance, but it's an important nuance. If the oversight board is initiating this action, asking you to refund the bonds, we can reclaim all of the staff costs in this issue. In this case, Glendale staff will be working on behalf of all of the taxing entities because they will all benefit from this. We think that this is consistent with the Dissolution Act. It lowers the cost to the successor agency. It gets additional dollars into each of the taxing entities' hands immediately, and then long-term, it pays off a long-term obligation, that the loan to the city, it pays that off much more quickly, and so the taxing entities will start to receive their full share sooner than otherwise. So for those reasons, we are recommending approval, that you ask staff to have the oversight board direct the successor agency to refund these bonds, start the process to refund these bonds. Our financial advisor, Suzanne Harrell, is here, as is Finance Director Bob Elliott, if you have any questions on that.
So you really want us to do this today, huh?
I really do. I think it's $500,000 additional to the city of Glendale.
Mr. Giant?
Just so I'm clear, the loan that the city gave to the redevelopment agency, I thought that was lost when redevelopment was eliminated. So,
Except under the circumstances that, to a limited degree, if cities basically play ball with the state of California, then we are eligible to receive was a finding of completion?
Yes.
Finding of completion. If you have that finding of completion, then they will proffer a formula by which you could start to repay yourself those co-op loans. So they've held the co-op loans as a carrot for cities to comply with the Dissolution Act.
so how much money? What would be the, assuming that we can get these out in time and that the oversight committee approves that? How much money are we talking about to come back to repay our loan?
We think that there's about $875,000 in savings, so that would be available for distribution to the taxing entities. In the formula, when you repay yourself, you can take half of that amount to use for repayment. So $435,000, $440,000 additional that doesn't exist today, because we're paying a higher debt service. We're using tax increment to pay a higher debt service. What this will do is reduce that by $875,000 a year, half of which we can use to repay the city.
So that's an annual
Annually.
repayment. And the total amount of the loan is how much?
The total amount of the
Outstanding.
city loan to the redevelopment agency is now about $66 million. We had to recalculate that. We wrote off something more than that. We had to recalculate that using a different interest rate going back to the 70s. So it currently is $66 million.
And
But
where
at the
would-
end, we were repaying ourselves $7 million a year.
Right.
A far cry from
It
$500,000.
is now. So where does this money go, the repayment?
Well, that's
General
a good
fund?
question. It would come back to the general fund, as that was the source of that loan. But as Phil uses the co-op loan really as kind of an order of magnitude, we could apply it there as a for instance. We are going to be recommending to you that we hold a good portion of that in abeyance. It's not part of our budget calculations yet because it has not happened. We'd hold a nice chunk of that in abeyance to basically seed the economic development agency that we will be asking the council to establish based on the ordinance that you've already adopted last year. The economic development program that we have has no funding whatsoever. And so for marketing, for promotions, for any number of things that economic development department effectively would do, there has to be funding for it. So rather than go and hit all the other departments, we would be looking at this effectively new money because we already have written off the loan, as you say. We'd be looking at this as new money to seed our economic development efforts.
Okay. Okay, my other question is, it's anticipated the rate, that the bond rate would be 2.7%?
Yes,
And is that tax exempt?
tax exempt.
That's a hell of a, is our treasurer listening? I mean, that's a pretty good rate. I mean, that's an exceptional rate. And that's a 30-year maturity?
No, it's actually 9 years.
9 years?
9 years.
I mean, that's a
what we
real
have.
good rate. Can we buy our own bonds?
We looked at that. Yeah. No.
We can't?
No.
Okay. And I assume that's the market rate, but
Yes, and understand that is because of some of it measures the risk that's in this market, that people are going to invest and say, if I'm going to invest in a successor agency, this is the return that I need.
and this is reflective of our analysis by the Standard & Poor's and the
Yes.
the other rating agencies
And
about
what
the
our-
strengths and weaknesses
yes,
of
what our
our
underlying
city.
rating would be. That's
Okay.
correct.
The last point is, you know that I have the highest respect for the city charter. And this last election, we put before the voters the issue as to whether we would be able to, with regard to the GWP, conduct a negotiated bond sale. That proposition was soundly rejected, and the voters insisted that we go to an open market bond sale process. How does what we're doing today in any way conform with what the voters have told us just 3 weeks ago?
It's a great point because and it points out the difference between the city and what used to be the redevelopment agency. As the state has amply demonstrated, the redevelopment agency is a creature of the state as opposed to a creature of the city governed by our charter. So municipal bonds up to and including GWP have to be competitive sale, but bonds emanating from the redevelopment agency as a creature of the state can be negotiated sale. And
So the state actually permits that.
yes.
Now, I wish that was an argument that was put forth during the election, because having the state approval, seal of approval essentially on the process of negotiated bonds as opposed to the open bid, I think may have deflated some of the arguments against that, where they thought there would be underhanded dealings and wink, wink, we're giving you the special rate and the kickback. So the state actually approves this in a particular form of bond, agency issuance of bonds. That would have been a good point to raise. It's too late now, obviously, but I wish we had that information to bring out.
I will tell you that one of the reasons that we would lean towards negotiation, and not really addressing the point, but an additional, is we have an approval process that we have to go through that's several layers long. We have to go through, first the successor agency needs to approve things, then you have an oversight board that needs to do things, then you have the state Department of Finance. And there are differing time periods for everybody to do that review. We need some flexibility to be able to set and then move our sale date. That's an important piece for us. If we did a competitive bid, you advertise it, you set it, and that's the day you go.
That'd be reflected in the rate.
And it's reflected in the rate. If you're not ready to go, it's reflected in the rate.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other questions? Is there a motion?
I have a
Go ahead.
question. The 2010 issue, is apparently, it doesn't calculate into the $430,000 additional money?
It's not part of that. It would be in addition to. And we think there's another $1.2 million. It might save us about $50,000 a year.
Okay, and when will we know whether it does or does not save us?
We've been looking at that in the market. I'm looking and talking to Suzanne Harrell, our advisor.
Yes.
When we come back in July, that will have given us a chance to size up the market, to look at conditions and see if it makes sense for us to include. So when we come back in July with bond documents, we'll know that we're including 10 or we'll delete it. For today, we're asking you to include it just so that we have that flexibility.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, is there a motion
I'll move 2A.
for the agency? Right? The agency?
Just get my
It's for the
scorecard here.
agency board.
2A for the agency.
Is there a second?
Second.
No discussion, roll call, please.
Board members, Friedman,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Sinanian,
Yes.
Weaver.
Aye. Next, please.
3 is Director of Community Development regarding transfer of successor agency government use properties to the City of Glendale per the Dissolution Act. 3A is agency resolution transferring government use properties to the City of Glendale pursuant to HSC Section 34181A. 3B is council resolution accepting government use properties from the successor agency pursuant to HSC Section 34181A.
Mr. Ochoa.
Yes, sir. Mr. Lanzafame had characterized AB 1484 and the Dissolution Act as being chock full of nuance, and indeed here is still more nuance for you. What we have before you today is, if you recall, the former redevelopment agency having a number of real estate properties and assets that were transferred to the successor agency. From the successor agency, we are supposed to liquidate those assets for the betterment, to the benefit, rather, of the taxing entities. However, there is an opportunity for us to move properties back to the city for what is deemed government use and be able to hold on to those for the benefit of the residents and businesses of Glendale. So, Elena, what is your title now? I was so focused on Principal Administrative Officer Elena Bobolian's birthday, as I'm told. She's all of a sparkling 21 or 22, I'm guessing, being able to provide you with that list and what it means to Glendale. Elena?
Yeah, what is your title?
Good afternoon, Successor Agency and Council members. As Mr. Ochoa indicated, the Dissolution Act requires proper disposition of the assets, real property assets that were owned by the former redevelopment agency. And today we have for you consideration of 5 properties to be designated as government use. Subject to your approval, this also needs to be approved by the Oversight Board. And those 5 properties are a remnant parcel that's located at 300 East Broadway. It's being used as a surface parking lot. The 100 block of North Maryland, this is where the Maryland Exchange Garage is located. A separate parcel number but associated with the garage is the lobby at 138 North Brand Boulevard. The next asset is the green at the Americana. This is the open space parcel located at the Americana at Brand. And lastly, 218 through 222 South Brand, which is the Paseo that's going to be connecting the Americana to the future Civic Complex. And so those are the properties at this time that we would like to designate as government use. We will also be including the remaining properties when we put together the long-range property management plan that's also required. The finding of completion that was referred to in the previous item, once we get that, we have 6 months to complete our long-range plan. And so the remaining properties will be incorporated into the plan. But at this time, the law does allow the successor agency, with approval of the Oversight Board, to designate these properties as government use.
Questions? Mr. Najarian.
There's a reference to the Health and Safety Code 34181A. Do Do you have that handy?
I do.
So what kind of uses are public that would make these parcels possible return?
Government use purposes such as roads, school buildings, parks, police and fire stations, libraries, and local agency administrative buildings.
Okay. So how does the parking garage?
It's not limited to, and so when we've contacted DOF in the past, they've told us they've considered properties such as museums as government use, as long as you're able to show the benefit. And so the parking garage is, it benefits the public because it's the public parks there.
So how about the Alex Theater?
The Alex
That
Theater.
fall under that?
That's a good question. The Alex Theater could fall under that, and the reason we're not including it at this time is, as you know, we still have financial commitments through the CIP program to put together the capital improvement projects at the Alex Theater. So we're not including it at this time so that we can continue to list it on our ROPS and seek funding.
Because if we did transfer it to the city, then the city would be on the hook for all of those improvements.
Yeah, they're on their own at that point, so.
At some point, can you give us a list of the properties that are left on the table that you think are eventually going to be taken over by the state, just so we can figure out ways to outsmart the Department of Finance or the Oversight Board? Both.
Those properties will all come to you in the long-range financial property management plan that Ms. Babolian referred to. That will be in the next 6 months. We have about 9 properties, and all of our properties are either government use or they're committed to a project. We don't have any surplus property like many cities do.
Any other questions? And we have a motion,
I move
3A,
yes.
for the agency.
3A for the agency.
Okay, roll call, please.
Board members: Friedman,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Sinanian,
Yes.
Chair
Move
Weaver.
3B for the council?
Wait, can I say aye first?
Chair Weaver.
Okay, now,
Okay, sorry, I thought you did.
Cut
I
off
will
the
move.
mayor?
I thought he said yes.
Oh, you are in trouble.
all right, I made
I'm going to
a,
pay for that one.
I made a mental note of it.
He's written in a little notepad in his desk. I'll move 3B for the council if it pleases the mayor.
Sure does.
I'll second that. With the
That
same-
pleases me, too. Roll call, please.
Council members: Friedman,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Sinanian,
Yes.
Move to adjourn.
Mayor Weaver.
Oh, I'm sorry. I am.
That notepad is getting full.
I'm sorry.
You don't listen to these two, okay?
Mayor Weaver.
Yes. Aye, yes. Okay, now, motion adjourned for the agency,
I'll move to adjourn for the agency,
Second?
motion adjourned for the council.
adjourn for council.
Second?
Okay, now, closed session.